Tansei, I'm Kristanachkate. Welcome to APTN National News. Thank you for joining us on this Thursday. The City of Winnipeg is preparing to pay out $7 million to settle a trio of wrongful imprisonment claims, according to CTV News. It has to do with the case of Brian Anderson, Alan Woodhouse, and Clarence Woodhouse, the three Indigenous men who were previously convicted and imprisoned in 1974 for the murder of a Winnipeg restaurant worker. All three were exonerated in recent years. The public service says the money would be used to settle a suit brought forward by each of the three men claiming false arrest, negligent investigation, and human rights violations, among other things. It adds the city is in talks with its insurance provider about coverage, but the payout is likely to be less than the settlement amount. Winnipeg's mayor says he intends to vote in favor of the settlement.
My intention right now is to vote in favor of that because that's what the courts have said, and so I think the city has an obligation to make good on obviously what the courts have instructed us to do. But first and foremost, we'll be having discussions with our city staff at the meeting.
The province and federal government are also named in the suit. James Lockyer, one of the lawyers for the men, told CTV News he's not able to comment on the proposed settlement. The Executive Policy Committee will vote on whether or not to approve the funds next week. The Crown and Defence have now wrapped up their cases in a manslaughter trial in Saskatoon, with each side making their final arguments to a jury who will decide the fate of a man charged in the death of a woman. CTV's Laura Woodward now on what was said.
Here's closing arguments in the trial of Roderick Sutherland. He's pleaded not guilty to manslaughter, unlawful confinement, and offering an indignity to human remains in connection to the death of 30-year-old Megan Gallagher. Court heard Gallagher was killed about 5 years ago inside a Saskatoon garage while she was restrained to a chair. Both lawyers referenced a statement Sutherland gave to police. The defense said Sutherland went to police on his own, that he was afraid of the people in his garage who killed Gallagher. The Crown argued Sutherland didn't tell the full story, that he was more involved than he claimed. The defense told the jury that while it was Sutherland's garage, he had no control over what was happening, and that it wasn't safe for him to step in, given the group's gang ties. The credibility of a key witness was also a focus in closing arguments. The Crown told the jury that Bobby Thomas was honest. He had nothing to gain by lying on the stand. Meanwhile, the defense argued Thomas had a motive, that he wanted revenge on Sutherland for going to police, and his testimony can't be trusted. 9 people have been charged in Gallagher's death. Sutherland is the last to stand trial. The next steps will be for the judge to charge the jury, providing instruction on how to reach a verdict. Laura Woodward, CTV News, Saskatoon.
A coroner's inquest is underway in Constance Lake First Nation in Ontario. It is examining the deaths of 5 people who died during a blastomycosis outbreak between 2021 and 2022. CTV's Amanda Hicks has more.
From November 2021 to January 2022, a blastomycosis outbreak spread across Constance Lake First Nation, a community of approximately 750 people living on reserve. The outbreak affected more than 50 individuals and claimed the lives of Luke Moore, Lorraine Shaganash, Lizzie Sutherland, Mark Ferris, and Douglas Taylor. As the inquest began, presiding officer Dr. Michael Wilson extended his condolences in his opening statement, acknowledging how difficult the process would be for the families and the community, saying the hope is to learn from past events and build towards a better future. He added the inquest is not to assign blame or legal ramifications. 5 jurors will listen to evidence to answer 5 critical questions about the deceased, including the who, when, where, how, and by what means they died. The inquest will also examine broader factors that contributed to the tragedy, including whether the healthcare experience of First Nations people was impacted by their Indigenous identity and place of residence. Additionally, the jury can also provide recommendations which will be shared with levels of government, agencies, and organizations to prevent a similar tragedy from touching this community again. The Anishinaabe-Aski Nation expressed its support for Constance Lake First Nation in a statement saying in part, This deadly lung infection continues to pose serious risk to the community, and we look forward to understanding more about what, if anything, can be done to prevent similar tragedies from occurring. The first 3 days of the inquest will be held at the Community Hall in Constance Lake First Nation, with the remainder held virtually. Approximately 30 witnesses will share their accounts during the 25-day inquest. Amanda Hicks, CTV News, Sudbury.
Membertou Mi'kmaq Nation community members in Cape Breton on the East Coast held a peaceful protest on Wednesday. It was against a proposed cannabis bylaw that would give the band regulatory control over cannabis dispensaries on reserve. About 20 people stood in front of the Membertou band office, a community about a 4-hour drive north of Halifax. The proposed bylaw would regulate the distribution and retail licensing of cannabis in Membertou. Chief and Council are considering 4 possible store locations in a cannabis commercial zoning area. They then lease the space to licensed retailers. There are currently about 15 dispensaries located in the residential area of the community. Candace Paul does not own a dispensary, but says the regulations and relocation will put people out of business.
However, that being said, anything that you had already acquired, anything that you had already built, invested in, that all goes out the window, and that does not move over with you. So, if the band wants these entrepreneurs to move and also pay into a leasing agreement, forgetting all of their previous investments, there needs to be compensation. There's none, and
young people need to be better prioritized by the provincial government when it comes to wildfire preparedness and response, says the Manitoba Advocate for Children and Youth. The advocate says more than 32,000 Manitobans were impacted by the wildfires, with Indigenous children being disproportionately impacted. The Children's Advocate Office is calling for the province to adopt new child-sensitive climate policies after Manitoba's worst wildfire season on record. In the statement of concern, Advocate Sherry Gott says mental health, education, and child protection supports must be at the heart of emergency planning. Manitoba's Minister for Indigenous Futures says his government is committed to reviewing their wildfire response. In an emailed statement, he said, in part, "Our government worked hard to support evacuated children throughout the season, whether it was running kids programming at 9 congregate shelters, finding spots in classrooms for kids living away from their home community, or providing in-house childcare supports to give parents relief." Gott says the province should keep this in mind.
Safety, first of all. Make sure that there's psychological services in place when they arrive at the place that they're evacuated to, and when they return home. Education, of course, is a big key. You need that stability, and children that, go to school every day and then all of a sudden there's no school. Like, it's just, it's hard on their mental health. We never know where the fire is going to start, right? But there should be proactive plans, an all government approach should be taken, and developing those preparedness plans to ensure that families and children have the appropriate supports that they need, whether it be fire, flood, weather related.
A First Nation woman is back home after being detained by Israeli forces for attempting to bring much-needed humanitarian aid to Gaza. She was aboard one of the several ships that was part of the Freedom Flotilla coalition sailing the Mediterranean Sea to break Israel's naval blockade of Gaza. Grassroots activist and Salt River First Nation member Misquasin Agnew was met with beating drums and emotional cheers when she landed at the Toronto Pearson International Airport over the weekend. Agnew says she joined the Freedom Flotilla Coalition, or FFC, along with journalists and doctors as an act of Indigenous solidarity with Palestinians who the United Nations say are experiencing genocide at the hands of Israel. The FFC says last week, a total of 145 non-violent activists from 30 different countries were aboard the humanitarian aid ships bound for Gaza when they were taken to Israel and detained last week. Agnew says Canada needs to sanction Israel and calls for a two-way arms embargo.
I broke no laws. Israel kidnapped me from international waters. They broke international law. They held me illegally. I did nothing wrong. Gaza has the right to receive me at their waters. Gaza has the right to receive people at their shores. Open the humanitarian corridor. Stop starving these people. This is a manufactured famine. People are starving to death. Children are starving to death.
The Yukon is currently heading into a territorial election. We'll bring you an update right after the break. Welcome back. The Yukon is heading into a territorial election in just a few weeks' time, with voting day just around the corner. Two First Nations organizations in the territory held debates to see how the three parties vying to be the next government would address their concerns. Here's APTN's Sarah Connors with a breakdown of those debates.
It's election season, and with elections comes debates. Sort of. This debate, hosted by the Council of Yukon First Nations in Whitehorse, heard from the territory's three parties on issues that matter to First Nations people, though it felt more like a forum as party leaders read from prepared notes.
It's a chance to hear what each party stands for and what they say they will do.
Leaders answered questions on issues like climate change, Arctic security, and mining, and how they would support First Nations if elected. Liberal incumbent leader Mike Pemberton started his remarks with an apology, acknowledging comments he made earlier this summer to First Nations leaders that he didn't see skin color were insensitive.
I'm sorry. What I said at that moment was wrong.
Beyond that, he pledged that his party would continue to develop new minerals legislation in partnership with First Nations and advance land use planning.
The work isn't easy and it isn't over, but we'll keep showing up shoulder to shoulder to get it done.
As for Conservative leader Curry Dixon, he promised to cut electricity hikes, invest in energy infrastructure, and improve affordability.
And we know that means that we need to ensure that we continue to partner with Yukon First Nations, partner with First Nations governments, and find a path forward for all of us that improves the lives of all Yukoners.
NDP leader Kate White says her party has ambitious plans to improve health care access. She also pledged to launch a public inquiry into past mining disasters, something the other parties have been hesitant to fully embrace.
It's long past time that government stop fighting with First Nations. I'm committed to truly listening, to learning, to working together, to building respectful relationships and to finding solutions together.
Thank you to all the candidates. And
Another debate held by the Yukon First Nation Chamber of Commerce touched on issues like procurement, economic growth, and investment. But Liberal leader Mike Pemberton was noticeably absent, replaced by Southern Lakes candidate Cynthia James. All parties committed to helping First Nations businesses thrive. The Yukon territorial election will take place on November 3rd. Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
Now to news in Australia. A young Yamachi man who's taken out a Trainee of the Year award in Western Australia says the support and acknowledgement of elders makes his job all the more worthwhile. NITV's Michael Park has more.
Josh Narrier works as a ranger across the midwest of WA with the Yamji Land Ranger program. He's part of the Mentored Aboriginal Training and Employment Scheme, or MATES as it's known, and is the Trainee of the Year.
I feel really privileged and really grateful that I get to be out here on country and work out here and contribute to conserving it.
The 26-year-old has been with the Department of Conservation and Biodiversity since 2022, currently acting in the Joint Management Coordinator role.
I wanted to go for a job with the department because it's very hands-on. You get to contribute to a lot of the work in conservation, and you're pretty much the first in. And I care about country, I care about the land, I care about conservation.
Josh says continuing the legacy of his elders in caring for country inspires him in his work.
I really want to do the elders proud, and I want to do the right thing by the country and by the people. When I'm liaising with the elders and getting their feedback and hearing the elders say to me that you're on the right path and you're doing the right thing and you're doing well, it makes me feel fulfilled.
Michael Park, NITV News.
Staying in Australia, Victoria's longest-running multi-arts festival has returned to NAR Melbourne. The Fringe Festival is doing things a little different this year, with the deadly Fringe lineup drawing eager audiences. NITV's Cameron Gooley reports.
After 3 decades as a nurse and midwife, a career in stand-up comedy wasn't how Janty Blair thought she'd be spending her 60s.
Nobody expects to be doing stand-up at this age. And when I say stand-up, it's more like limp-up because I've got arthritis and so many bones in my body.
Auntie Janty is now running her comedy show at Melbourne's Fringe Festival, talking life and dating.
The only question that I have about my next man: has he had a hip replacement? Are his knees real?
For Janty, comedy is a way to tell important yarns while disarming her audience.
And there is a political focus of my content, being a black woman in Australia in the 2000s. And I really love that I can do it in such a way that makes people smile and laugh, but underneath there's a little message, I guess.
Nagamba is another First Nation show playing at Fringe, a dance performance about the Emu Sisters.
The Emu Sisters came down to earth and paved the land, and they go through the fire to become spirits, and their spirits then go to different generations of Yanars to help guide and strengthen them on their journey.
A key theme of the piece, to embrace diversity within the community.
It pretty much teaches community to not outcast people for their differences. So It champions those Yinnars out there that have different perspectives and honours the evolution of culture and identity.
Black excellence on full display. Cameron Gooley, NITV News.
We now want to tell you about this week's second web poll question. Over on our website, we ask, should provinces be allowed to pass laws that could impact treaty rights without consultations? You can answer yes, no, or unsure. Go to our website at aptnnews.ca/poll to have your say. We have previews for this week's Nation to Nation and APTN Investigates. We'll be right back. Thanks for staying with us. Fredericton 8 in showers there, 14 in Charlottetown. 6 in the Grand River, Anujiwak 5. Gaspé 11 in showers there, Quebec City 9. Ottawa plus 10 and sunny there, Peterborough 12. Sioux Lookout 8, Wawa 10. Churchill 6, God's Lake plus 8. Gimli 10, Winnipeg 9 in showers. Cloudy in Regina at 8, Saskatoon 3. Buffalo Narrows 5, La Ronge 6. Grand Prairie 11, Fort McMurray partly cloudy at 9. Sunny in Calgary at 10, Medicine Hat 12. Tofino 10, Penticton 11. Fort Nelson 14, Dees Lake plus 4 and rain there. Old Crow minus 3, Mayo plus 1. Wrigley 2 in showers, Watee 0. Sax Harbor minus 10 and suns out there, Polituck minus 2. Baker Lake 2, Chesterfield 4. And Iqaluit minus 2, Iqaluit plus 1. An Indigenous woman from Alberta recently showcased her culinary talents on the big screen, bringing her passion for healthy, affordable, and flavorful food to the MasterChef Canada stage. Veronica McCrae is a Métis woman from Edmonton. She says she grew up in poverty and started watching cooking shows at a young age. But her passion for cooking began after having her first daughter at 17. She wanted her to have a healthy relationship with food, even when money was tight. McCrae founded The Good Place, a company that promotes food security and teaches people how to cook using accessible, affordable, and healthy ingredients. When she applied to the show, she had 3 goals: to test herself, show her children what bravery looks like, and inspire other Indigenous chefs.
I wanted to really make my Métis Nation proud, specifically the Indigenous youth. And bringing representation to television, to the culinary arts was very important to me. And to have a platform in which I could speak of food security for Indigenous people.
Unfortunately, McCrae was eliminated in the first episode, but says she plans to keep working in the food industry and continue inspiring others to take their first steps into the culinary world. Now it's time for host Karen Pugliese to tell us what the topic of discussion will be on this week's Nation to Nation.
Coming up after the evening news, if you've seen mental health programs shut down in your community, your kids have lost a breakfast program or educational support, you're not alone. Across the country, families are losing support once covered by Jordan's Principle. We'll explain why the government scaled back the program, what it means for kids who need help most, and whether anything's going to change. Child advocate Cindy Blackstock and lawyer David Taylor join me, along with Minister of Indigenous Services, Mandy Golmasti. All this ahead on Nation to Nation.
Thank you, Karen. APT Investigates also returns this week with a new chapter of Secrets of the Bay. Following a 2-year investigation, reporter Kenneth Jackson unraveled police theories surrounding the deaths of 2 Mohawk men in 2015. Now, with their manner of death changed from accidental to undetermined, the Toronto Police Homicide Unit has reopened the case, and Kenneth is back on the road searching for answers. Here's a preview.
Families have said the same name for years. A man on the other side of the border, someone they believe killed their sons. Many in the community believe it too, even if there's no evidence to prove it. And now I'm crossing into the United States to find him. The man hasn't been seen in Tyendinaga in more than 10 years. Not since the bodies of Matthew Fairman and Tyler Merica were pulled from the Bay of Quinte. He left immediately, back to his home in the Onondaga Nation outside of Syracuse, New York. That's where I'm going, to knock on his door and ask him, did you kill the boys? It's about 9 a.m. in early April. It's been just a month since we forced the coroner to change Tyler and Maddie's manner of death from accident to undetermined, after proving the police theory of how the boat sank was wrong. As a result, for the first time in 10 years, authorities are now considering homicide, and all the evidence is being re-examined. Still, right now I'm wondering if I made the right decision to come here. The only backup I have is my camera operator, filming from inside our car rental parked on the side of the road.
And that new episode of APTN Investigates will air this Saturday evening. And that's your daytime newscast for this Thursday. Dennis Ward is back for your evening newscast in a few hours, including a new segment of Truth in Politics. Please join us then. From our HQ in Winnipeg, thank you for watching. We'll see you again next day.